look on the syllabus, it's divided out in that schedule. So all of those chapters.
Thank you.
Yeah, so nothing like from the first exam, like not including the stuff that was on the first exam.
You just said one including the first stuff.
Yeah, so what we've covered since the first exam, and then what we're going to cover today. And then if everybody's ready to go ahead and start class, I can go ahead and start if Tom doesn't have any other. Okay, so yeah, as it says on your syllabus, your exam will be October 12th, which is next Thursday. So today I'm going to finish up chapters 11 and 12 because they're pretty short, so I'm going to go ahead and cover those today. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time so I can give you a little bit of review information today, and then we're going to have Tuesday as well to go over and review a little bit more. So I would encourage you to go ahead and start studying the chapters that you have. So that you can be a little bit more prepared for that review on Tuesday. And then like Carolyn mentioned, so what I've done is I've posted a forum for Exam 2 review. So what I'm going to do to kind of get everybody into their notes and everything and kind of get you studying and reviewing is every now and then I'm going to, up until the exam, I'm going to post questions that are going to be probably questions that you're going to see on the exam to kind of get you thinking about the types of things I'm going to pull out from your notes. So that'll give everyone a chance to see the questions that I post and answer them and then look at others' answers, and I'll be giving feedback about whether it's correct or not and kind of what I'm looking for. So just a good forum for everybody to really interact and review the material. And then that way, hopefully, you can come with any questions that you have on Tuesday, and we'll have all day Tuesday to review, and I'll go through the lectures and kind of what I'm going to cover. So just off the bat, any terms that are bolded and underlined in any of the chapters, be very familiar with those. Just like the first exam, it's a good chance those are going to pop up because intro classes are, kind of to get you familiar with vocabulary and terminology in that field. So be familiar with those. Be familiar with like the AM/PM rule and terms like seasonally polyestrous. So some of what you saw on the first exam, you may see again on the second exam if we've covered it. Like we've still talked about animals that are seasonally polyestrous. So be familiar with those. Be familiar with the different digestive systems, ruminant versus non-ruminant. So just a couple things off the top of my head that I know will be on the exam. And then I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of class and then again next Tuesday. And be sure to check out that review forum that's on Blackboard. Do you might have any questions about that? Okay. And then also there's an assignment posted on Blackboard, which it was my bad. I forgot to mention it last week. And I think not everyone checks Blackboard as much as I do. So I'm going to extend the deadline on that until next Wednesday. So it's called Livestock Production Assignment. And if you go into Blackboard, there's an announcement about it. Okay. And then you can also find it under assignments, and it's blue. So that will be, I'm going to extend the deadline until next Wednesday.
Is that the one where we have to pick a species we've talked about?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I totally meant to mention it like last Thursday, and I forgot, and then we didn't have class Tuesday, so I'm going to extend that deadline.
Did you get mine?
Did you email it to me, or did it? I haven't checked Blackboard this
morning. Did it on Blackboard where you had it?
Okay, good, awesome. Then it's probably, yeah, but a lot of people haven't done it yet, so I figured they probably didn't see it, and since I hadn't announced it in class, I wanted to extend that deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have a little bit more time to work.
I just have a question about lab reports.
Okay, that's probably going to be one for Tom. But.
Well, I mean, because you're grading our lab reports, aren't you?
I'm not.
You're not?
You're not?
I'm not. Am I supposed to?
I thought you were. Oh, well. Oops.
Oh.
Okay, well, we will figure it out and get them graded in a.
Okay. Well, I can even if you need me to help with them. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to like grade the lab or not.
Okay.
Did you get the email Dixie emailed out to all of us?
Which one?
About the guidelines for our lab reports?
Okay. Yes, Dixie, something we're trying to do is something we're working on. We're trying to come up with guidelines for grading these reports, and we finally got around to making it. You don't necessarily have to retroactively go back and fix your old one. I'm assuming that's your question, to meet those guidelines. We're gonna be flexible, but kind of try to follow those guidelines going forward
Yeah,
with
I
future
can do that
reports.
from now on, but she said that we can resubmit any assignment that does not already follow those guidelines. So
Yeah.
my question is, do I have to go back and,
I'm not gonna lose any sleep over it if you don't.
but you're not gonna take one?
Yes, that's what I mean by that.
Okay.
But going forward, follow the guidelines, because we're trying to get the guidelines, because we're up for our accreditation report thing and stuff, and we gotta,
Right.
have all this paperwork and make sure that things are done the right way and consistently and yada, yada, yada. But if you're really bored and looking for something to do on a rainy day when a hurricane comes through, and you want to change, if you want to fix your reports, fine, but any of them that I grade, I'm not gonna do that.
So please don't take anything off of the state fair one, because I wrote up my report and submitted it and turned it in, and then 3 hours later I got her email.
We'll see.
No, it is no, we'll see. I'm telling you.
No, I know, yeah.
We can look at the timestamp when I turned mine in.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Tom, would you want me to grade the state fair report since I was there, and then since you were at the other ones and you kind of know what they saw and what would be correct and whatnot, do you want to divide it that way?
Okay, yeah, that'd be good. And then we'll come up with some kind of plan for dealing with the future ones.
Okay. Yeah, just because I wasn't at the other labs, like if they write something, I don't necessarily know if it's correct or not.
I wasn't actually at them either. I was doing training, but still.
Oh, okay.
But I've done at least one of them before, so that'll work.
Keeping in mind for the state fair one, I know for plant class and animal class in Blackboard, it mentioned, what did you think about the giant watermelons and pumpkins?
Mhm.
They were not there.
No, they weren't.
So
I didn't see him on Saturday either, to be honest.
Yeah, they're supposed to come out at like noon Saturday, but
yeah, they
because the thing, I made those Blackboard things 6 weeks ago. And I just assumed that the big pumpkins and watermelons and stuff were going to be there. And I'm just sort of, what did you think about, what did you say? And I was just throwing that out there,
I did
something
not
that you
write
could have
about-
commented on.
I didn't write about if I would like to eat them or not. Thing.
Yeah, and you would not want to eat them, trust me.
I'm sure I would.
Anyway,
All right. Cool. So that's good with you, Tom? Are you sure? Because I can grade them all if you need me to.
yes. Okay, so you'll handle the state fair ones, and I'll go back and get the earlier ones.
Yeah, if that's fine with you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure actually how that was going to work out. So, all right. Well, if everybody is ready, then we'll go ahead and start lecture for today. If anyone has
Another test next Thursday, Jay. She'll talk about it.
Better to ask.
Can everybody see that PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Look, a duck. Hey, Affleck is visiting today. It's okay. This
Yes.
is perfect.
Very appropriate.
It is very,
All right.
especially since.
Today we're going to be talking about chickens and other poultry.
Is that a peking? It looks to be a peking.
A duck?
Yeah, we have chickens.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not really up on my breeds of ducks, I'll be honest.
Well, I'm going to assume it's probably a peking.
I wish we had more dogs.
I know.
So just a little introduction. The biology of poultry species exhibit very unique features compared to some of the other livestock species. So they do not have teeth and they have feathers. So they have different skeletal and muscle requirements for flight. And then they actually have presence of internal testes in the male, so contrary to other livestock species where they're outside the body. And then you have adaptations for egg laying in the female. So just a couple of things right off the bat that are different from, cattle and pigs and things like that. Just to go over some poultry terminology so that you're kind of familiar with the terms that are used. A hen is an adult female chicken. A pullet is a young hen. Rooster, of course, everyone probably knows that one, is an adult male chicken. Pone is a castrated chicken. Mom is an adult male turkey. Chick is a newly hatched chicken, so you can say chick or baby chick. Poult is a newly hatched turkey. And embryo is what the developing chick is called until it hatches. And then avian, of course, is just an adjective that refers to birds. So like swine refers to pigs, avian refers to birds. So production in the U.S., Europe, and also in Asia is increasing, and it's vertically coordinated. So I'm actually going to talk about that term a little bit more in detail later. There are contractual relationships among genetics companies, breeders, growers, or egg producers, and integrators and processors for meat and egg. So there are different production models that you can have. So there's production contracting, and then there's also a situation where you could have ownership of all stages of production, and that would be complete vertical integration, which, like I said, we'll talk about in a little bit. So just to give you an idea of where chickens are produced in the U.S., and chickens are called broilers when they're being produced for consumers. So this map just shows you where they're produced by state. So you can see that the states that are the darkest have the highest production of broilers. So it's actually quite a bit in the southeast, and you have a little bit in the Midwest, but you can see you have slightly different top states than you do with some of the other livestock states. So actually quite a bit in Virginia and North Carolina, and then a lot in Georgia and Alabama. So birds were domesticated from jungle fowl, which was known as Gallus gallus. That's the genus and species name there, so pretty easy. Along the Yellow River in what's today known as Northeast China, around 5500 BC. And the ancestor of the domestic chicken is the red jungle fowl, which is Gallus gallus gallus, which was a subspecies found in Southeast Asia. So at least their genus and species name is pretty easy to remember compared to some of the others. So these birds were traded and arrived in present-day Iran at about 3800 BC. And then on the Indian subcontinent in 2500 BC. They were in the Middle East about 2000 BC and present-day Greece a little bit before that. And then Western Europe, they eventually made it there, into England and Japan around 150. And then turkeys were actually domesticated about 4,500 years ago in Mesoamerica. So that would be like kind of Latin America, close to South America, that region. So just kind of give you a visual of the external anatomy of chickens. So they have lots of different types of feathers. So you have the tail feathers. They do have earlobes and then eyes, beak. So things that are specific about a rooster are the secondary sex characteristics, which would be this large comb. Their comb is extremely large. Some of them may be so big that they even flap over to the side. And then you have the wattles. And then the spur also is that right there. It's a little bit hard to see. Sometimes they're a little bit watered down. But so those are things that you can easily look at to distinguish between a rooster and a hen. Another thing is the type of feathers and the colors. The roosters will have a little bit more tail feathers going on, like a lot longer and things like that, and they kind of have more long feathers up around their neck. So just to give you kind of, get familiar with those terms a little bit. I'm not going to ask you to label a chicken or anything like that, but I would expect you to kind of know and be able to tell me how you can distinguish a rooster from a hen. So this would be really important.
Would you accept the word crown instead of comb?
Yes.
Okay.
So a little bit about poultry production. Broiler breeders are what you call the parent stock for the production of meat chickens. So like on that map where it said broilers, that's where that term comes from. Are actually photostimulated, so they become reproductively mature when they're exposed to daylight. So that would be 14 hours of daylight and 10 hours of darkness, so in spring and summer. So once those longer days kind of start, they will actually become mature and ready to breed. So you can kind of think of them as long day breeders, a little bit similar to the horse, but the main thing here is the photostimulation. So broiler breeders must not be overweight when they're photostimulated because that can affect their reproductive capabilities. So it's really important to manage them. by doing that, you can, or a way to do that is to restrict their feed or energy availability as they're kind of approaching that time period where they're going to be fed. So this is exactly how your book said it, and I just thought it was kind of funny. But when hens are lit or photostimulated, calcium concentration of feed is increased, and that is to meet the anticipated needs of egg production, and also to allow for calcium to be stored in their medullary bone. So it's really, really important that you have a diet with calcium, because calcium is one of the main components of the eggshell, and it's extremely important. So they're going to need that in their diet to be able to produce those eggs. Typically in the industry, artificial insemination is used very widely, and a healthy adult hen will lay an egg every 24 to 27 hours, and that's regardless if she's mated with a rooster or not. She'll still lay the egg. So they do not need to have mated in order to produce an egg. So that's something that I think sometimes people don't always know or keep straight. So they'll produce eggs regardless. So forced molting and caponization, something that happens in poultry. So forced molting will cause egg production to cease. And so it's a management technique to increase the number and the size of eggs, because after the bird molts, the egg production and size rebound will be at higher levels than before the molt. So because they weren't producing during the molting, they will kind of like have this compensatory egg production, and they'll be a little bit better than. So caponization and caponization is the removal of the present or the castration of a male chicken. It's actually pretty rare today due to improvements in growth rates and good meat quality, and it also requires high labor costs and then animal welfare concerns. As with anything in any livestock industry, there's always animal welfare concerns. And that's kind of one of the things that people aren't really so comfortable with. I know castration of pigs is kind of becoming a hot topic now. So it shows that things change. So this picture shows you the poultry digestive system. So poultry are actually monogastrics, so the same as a pig or a human or a dog. You could kind of think of them a little bit like modified monogastrics, because they do have a little bit, a few other things going on here that other species don't. So they have what's called the crop, which is actually, when food comes down the esophagus, it kind of settles in the crop and it's kind of stored there. Not much digestion happens, but it's just kind of stored there, and that is actually kind of an evolutionary thing. So that the birds were eating and then they had to kind of like fly away to get out of an area. They kind of had that food stored there for later purpose. And then after the crop, you have the proventriculus, kind of that little bump right there. So the proventriculus in the bird is actually like the true stomach of a pig or a human or anything like that. So that is where the chemical digestion is going to occur, and the feed's going to start being broken down by acid and by enzymes. And then after that, you have the gizzard. And so the gizzard is very, very muscular. I know some people will eat it, so you may have eaten it before, and it's pretty tough. So it's very muscular, because what happens in the gizzard is mechanical digestion. So the gizzard will be grinding up the feed particles to make them smaller, and so that's why it's extremely muscular. If you ever get a chance to dissect it, it's pretty cool.
I noticed you said some people eat it. Does that mean that you won't eat a chicken gizzard?
I've had it before. I like chicken livers a little bit better.
I do too. That's fine.
Yeah, I think I've had a chicken gizzard like once, and it was like a little too chewy for my taste.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought the way you presented that was kind of cute.
Yeah. Have you had it? Do you like chicken gizzards?
As a last resort, I prefer the liver.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, no, that was funny. So then after the gizzard, you have the small intestine. So the duodenum is this part right here. That's this kind of duodenal loop. So I don't think we've really talked about the parts of the intestine yet, so we'll get into that more in the nutrition section, so I won't go too far into that. But within that loop, you have the pancreas, which secretes digestive enzymes, and then the liver is also attached right there. And then you have the rest of the small intestine, the ceca, and the colon. And does anyone want to take a guess at what might happen in the ceca? Based on what you know about the other species, like what happens in the horse cecum?
Like the kind that fermentator?
Yes, so fermentation. So fermentation happens in the ceca and the colon in pretty much any species. So that's really, really good to always be familiar with, because that's where volatile fatty acids and things like that are produced. So it's pretty important. And then you have the colon, which is the large intestine, and then the colon.
I have a question.
Yes.
Will we get into detail about how chickens will technically swallow like small pieces of shell or small pebbles so that it can rest in a gizzard to help with the grinding of the food?
Yeah, I mean some of them will do that. I don't really have that in this lecture.
Okay.
But that's a good point.
Yeah, if we needed to know that.
So, like I said, poultry are monogastrics. So they have one simple stomach, so they're not also non-ruminant. Monogastric and non-ruminant, those terms mean the same thing. So be familiar with that, because that will probably be on your exam. They need to be raised with optimal nutrition, of course, just like any other livestock species. And for birds, methionine is actually a very important amino acid, and that is because it is needed for feather production. So because birds have feathers and other species don't have feathers, they require a little bit, relatively body size, they require more methionine, and it's more important for their nutrition. So that's a really big thing. And so feed is actually formulated to meet the requirements of the stage of production, just like with any other livestock species. It depends on what you're raising them for and where they are in the production chain. Nutrition must ensure rapid growth and high feed efficiency. So high feed efficiency means that bird is growing more on less feed, so you're saving feed costs. So that's something that producers always target in any species. And then corn, which is a cereal grain, and this was actually a question on your test, your old test, is a major feed ingredient in a lot of livestock feed. And so that's the same with poultry. Corn is a major ingredient in their diets. So a little bit about poultry genetics and breeds. So poultry have 78 chromosomes. Chickens have 78. Turkeys have 82. And then genetic selection over time has led to greatly increased growth rate, an increase in the number of eggs that are produced, again, feed efficiency. And then some common breeds are white leghorn and the adult Plymouth Rock chicken. And those are just two that we're going to kind of talk about, but there are tons of different breeds of chicken. So just be aware that there's a lot out there. Be aware. Okay, so this is the white leghorn. So obviously it's white, pretty obvious. This is actually a picture of, can anyone tell me if this is a hen or a rooster?
Rooster.
Rooster.
Yeah, exactly. You can see the big comb on its head and the huge wattle, and the long tail feathers. So the white leghorn is a very hardy breed. It will lay large white eggs. It makes a better coop or pinned bird, but it can be free range, especially in the summer when temps are up and the forage is more available. It does a little better in those kind of conditions, but it may not have to compete with other chickens. And then the Plymouth Rock chicken is a dual-purpose breed. So we talked about that a little bit with sheep and some of our other species. Does anybody remember what dual-purpose means?
Where you can farm them for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. So what would be like the two main reasons for a chicken?
Did you farm these ones for their feathers because they're so soft?
Meat and eggs.
Yes, meat and eggs.
Okay.
So there might be like smaller markets where, I know people sometimes will use like rooster feathers. I know actually my fiance ties flies. He fly fishes. So sometimes he'll get feathers from stores for that. So there probably is a smaller market for that, but the main markets would be meat and eggs. So that's another thing that's good to know for the exam. That term dual purpose means like either meat and eggs for chickens or meat and wool for sheep. So basically just that it has two purposes that it's raised for. So it's kind of, if you think about the term, it's self-contained. So be familiar with that and maybe be able to give me an example of a animal, like sheep would be wool. So the Plymouth Rock chickens are productive egg layers. They have a good lifespan. They're one of the most popular meat birds in the U.S., and they're commonly used as backyard chickens, which I would say is true because I would say most of the chickens that I've seen in people's yards actually really look like that compared to the white ones. And they have good maternal instinct. So a little bit about global poultry production. So poultry production is typically vertically integrated. So that's that term that I've been talking about a lot earlier in the lecture, and I think I've mentioned it a little bit in the fourth lecture. So vertically integrated means that one company has the combination of two or more stages of production. So typically with poultry, they've actually kind of moved to pretty much complete vertical integration. So one company like Tyson or Purdue would own everything along this chain that you see. They would own every aspect of that, from the genetics all the way to the slaughter of that bird. So definitely be familiar with that term for your exam as well. It's bolded and underlined. I'm pretty obvious about the terms I want you to know. So definitely know what that means. And so poultry is definitely pretty much fully vertically integrated, like I said. Swine production is kind of going that way. Typically what we've seen is what starts off in poultry kind of trickles down to swine. Poultry producers are a little quicker to kind of change things around, so it takes the swine people a little bit to catch up, but pork production is actually heading that way as well. So just a little bit about the production chain. So you have the chick that would come from the grandparent and parent stock. Then you would have a pullet farm, which if you remember, pullet means young hen. So those would be grown to about 20 weeks. Then they would be sent to a breeder farm, and they would begin laying eggs at about 26 weeks. So then in the hatchery, the eggs would be in the hatchery for 21 days, and then they would hatch. And so then those chicks would be sent to a broiler farm to be raised for meat. So the broilers would meet market weight in about 46 days. So it's actually a pretty short process compared to swine production or cattle. So then you have processing and then distribution. And then, of course, along the way, you have a feed mill because you need to feed all of these animals. So you would have a feed mill making the different diets in the different stages. So typically, like I said, a company would own all aspects of this, and they would have their own feed mills as well. So production of poultry meat and eggs is increasing globally. There are 4 major systems that are typically used. So you have commercial large-scale poultry production systems, which is typically what we see here in the U.S. Then in some countries, like more developing countries, you have traditional village packaging poultry that are poultry that are just out and about. You have semi-commercial systems where some may be fairly commercialized and others may not be. And you have alternate systems which would be where you kind of just have your backyard chicken. So the U.S. is the world's largest producer and second largest exporter of poultry meat. There's $20 billion in U.S. chicken meat sales, and I think that was probably around like the 2000s, that number. So in 2006, the U.S. produced 50 billion pounds of chicken meat and 91 billion eggs. So the top states, which I already showed you that map, are Georgia, Arkansas, and Alabama for chicken meat production. So for turkey, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Arkansas are the top states. So North Carolina and Arkansas are also pretty big for chicken, but big for turkey, and then you have Minnesota as well. So the top U.S. states for egg production are actually Iowa, Indiana, and Ohio. So not the same as the ones for meat production. And then for facilities, chickens are typically placed in large grow-out facilities with a controlled environment. And adequate ventilation is very, very important, and that's especially for poultry that are raised on deep litter. because poultry are raised on litter, it's kind of like, it's not litter like cat litter. It's kind of, think of it more like wood shavings almost, something kind of like that. And so they're obviously going to the bathroom and everything all the time on that litter. So if you don't have adequate ventilation, then you're going to get a lot of problems, maybe with ammonia, because that's coming, out of in their feces and urine. So it's really important to have adequate ventilation, so that you don't have all of that kind of confined in one area that's not able to really dry out. So a little bit more about their litter. Meat chickens and turkeys are raised on what's called deep litter, and that's to aid bird health by absorbing water that's spilled from waters and from excreta. So the litter is actually going to have to absorb quite a bit of liquid, as well as their feces, which can actually be kind of fairly liquid too. So it's really important. And it can be wood shavings, sawdust, brown straw, or any other fibrous material that would kind of be able to absorb that. And then litter would be removed after a number of runs when it's reached a critical depth and or unacceptable moisture level. So that's something really important to manage if you are raising birds. So poultry processing, birds are collected and harvested from grow-out facilities, and then they're transported by road to a processing facility where they will be slaughtered, cleaned, and eviscerated, so their intestines and everything will be removed. The USDA has a zero-tolerance policy for visible contamination of carcasses with fecal material. So if there's any fecal material on the carcass, that's going to be a problem, and that meat may not be able to be used. Processors use inside-out bird washes and antimicrobial chemicals to carcass washing water, and then brushes and dip tanks to make sure that everything is extremely clean. So for egg production, the majority of eggs produced in the U.S. are from birds in cages. That way the birds are not just walking around and squishing the eggs, so you kind of have to have some system set up there. Each hen produces over 250 eggs per year, because if you remember, they kind of produce like one every 24 to 27 hours, but they may not necessarily be producing one throughout every single day of the entire year, because remember that they need that photostimulation. So about 250. So the eggs are collected automatically, and the feed is delivered by a conveyor belt. They get water through nipple waterers, and then their excreta falls from the cages and is later removed. And there should be no I in that word. So briefly, just a little bit about ducks, geese, and other poultry. So ducks are raised for meat in the U.S. with over 100 million pounds produced each year. Geese production is a little bit smaller than ducks in the U.S. Major production of ducks and geese internationally happens with about 4 billion pounds produced annually in China. I know duck is actually fairly popular in China, not as popular as pork or chicken, obviously, but a little bit more popular than it is here. And then you have ratites, I guess is how you say that, which are large flightless birds, such as the ostrich, emu, and ostriches can be raised for hide, meat, and feathers with some eggs. Actually, when I was an intern at the zoo, I got to take care of some baby emus. Game birds and pigeons, and then a little bit about transgenic chickens. So game birds would include pheasants, guinea fowl, partridge, and quail. And so they're raised for release and then they're hunted. Pigeons can be raised for the sport of racing and showing. And then there's limited meat production from those in the U.S. And then transgenic chickens can be produced by the use of a retrovirus system using a germline that's placed into a host chicken embryo. So you don't really need to worry about the specifics of exactly how that happens. But be familiar with the term transgenic. Just means that genes from another animal have been deliberately put into the genome of whatever animal. So specialty meat and egg production, free-range chicken, which means chicken that's given access to the outdoors, and organic chicken and turkeys are available in the U.S. Eggs can be sold as organic and from cage-free chickens. And then in France, they have the Label Rouge program, where they produce specialty chickens that are claimed to have superior eating qualities. and again, claimed they may or may not. So it's always important to look at terms they use there. So any questions on chickens? That's all I have for that lecture.
Have any tryptophan?
Yep.
Ready.
Do chickens have any tryptophan in them?
Yeah, so they would have some. So tryptophan is also an amino acid. So those amino acids would be they're used to build protein, so the meat. So they would be present in the meat when you're eating it. It's any kind of protein that you're eating. So they would have a little bit. Turkey meat, obviously, you hear about it at Thanksgiving. People eating lots of turkey and getting tired.
Yeah,
So turkey meat would probably be a little bit higher than chickens, but they would have some. But not enough to like make you fall asleep.
I don't know if chickens had any or not.
Any other questions? All right, so then we're going to go ahead and move to the fifth lecture. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about aquaculture next, and this is a pretty brief lecture as well, so I wanted to go ahead and get this finished up so you have all the to start studying for your test. So just a little introduction about aquaculture. So there are 3 sources of fish and shellfish. You have commercial landings, also called catches or captures. Aquaculture includes mariculture, which would be like kind of marine animals. And then recreational fishing. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration defines aquaculture as propagation and rearing of aquatic organisms in controlled or selected environments for any commercial, recreational, or public purpose. So aquaculture includes the production of freshwater, brackish water, and seawater species. And so the seawater species would actually be what's considered the mariculture or marine aquaculture. So aquaculture species are categorized as either fin fish, which would be vertebrates, meaning that they have a backbone, or shellfish, which would be like your crustaceans and mollusks, those type of things. So a little bit about the domestication of aquaculture species. Carp, which are typically, if you go to big lakes and things, carp are pretty popular there. So you can some of those fish. People like to feed them with bread and like they gather into them. So carp and Nile tilapia were domesticated in the Fertile Crescent. Surprise, surprise, pretty much everything happened there over 2,000 years ago. And then aquaculture systems were developed to actually raise these fish. So most species produced today in freshwater aquaculture, and virtually all of those in marine aquaculture were actually domesticated in either your or your parents' lifetimes. So that's kind of cool. So the global importance of aquaculture, there is a pretty big need for aquaculture. There's been a growing consumer demand and a problem of overfishing. So aquaculture would kind of solve that because you wouldn't need to like fish as much in natural environments if you have, you know, like a fish farm where you can actually raise them. So many species are now raised by aquaculture, with many domesticated in the 20th century. So in 9 years, and this was probably 9 years from your book, so it's probably been about 10 or 20 years from now. Freshwater inland aquaculture has grown by 90.4%, and marine aquaculture has grown by 98.2%. So pretty dramatic increases there. So aquaculture produces over 95% of carp and oyster, over 70% of salmon, trout, and tilapia, and over 40% of shrimp. And carp are the #1 group of species that are raised by aquaculture, and China's the largest carp producer. Although I've actually heard that carp is not that tasty. Has anyone ever eaten carp?
Yeah, it ain't good. It's not.
Not good. Okay, that's what I've heard.
There's some recipes that involve a board and eating the board.
Yeah, I've never tried it, but I have not heard good things about carp. So I just find it very interesting that that's the #1 species that's raised in China. Maybe they have a way to cook it that makes it better. I don't know.
They got a different type of breed of carp there.
That's true. That's a very good point too. Yeah, it could be very different from what we have here, so maybe it tastes better. So China is the #1 country for aquaculture production and export. So aquaculture production grosses $1.06 billion annually, and there is opportunity for the industry to grow. The U.S. is a major importer of shellfish and finfish, and like I said earlier, there's been a growing consumer demand for fish, also probably for health reasons, which we'll talk about a little bit. So catfish and shellfish production is also increasing. And this slide just shows you a picture of some fish farms. So the one on the top left would kind of be more of a confined system, a little bit smaller scale probably, where you have a little bit more control over the water environment, so maybe fish that have more sensitive requirements. And then at the bottom right, that's one that's obviously like probably in the sea. So it's a really open environment, and you probably wouldn't be able to really control the water at all or as much. So just to kind of show you some pictures of some differences there.
Leanna,
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt much, but the world's largest indoor production of tilapia is just south of Martinsville here.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Cool.
they produce 4 million pounds of tilapia a year
Wow.
Good.
and ship between 10 and 20 million pounds of live tilapia every day.
Jeez, that's nuts. I didn't know that's where that was. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's I've got a request in for that to be one of our field trips, but the people are really protective of
Right.
their situation because of biosecurity.
Yeah.
I've tried to go in years past, but I've sent them an email requesting an opportunity to go again, and I'm gonna follow up and call them. But they do it totally inside a building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. I actually was at a facility out in Kentucky recently, and they do a lot of fish research for additives for aquaculture, and they had a whole building with just different tubs of species, and like they had little baby trout and they had salmon, and like it was cool to see. It's crazy how they can do all of that indoors.
Yeah.
Nuts. But yeah, no, thank you for jumping in. That's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, which Virginia Tech has a pretty decent setup back there, back behind the pig barns. If you go through the woods, or at least
Yeah, back there. Yeah, I don't know that I haven't actually seen the one at Tech. There was a building behind the pig barns with bears in it when I was there, so that was cool. Although I never actually got to see them.
Okay, that was after me, but
Yeah.
but yeah, you go past the pig barns, hang left, and you go back into the woods somewhere. I've been to the building, but never was in it either.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to do that. Yeah, so a little bit about fish nutrition. So this picture just shows you kind of the different components of their digestive system. It's a little bit different from some of the other species, but not too much different. The big thing to know, though, is that not all digestive system components are present in all fish. So some fish may not have every single part of this system. So it kind of just depends. And so fish, there are lots of different species, and they can have a very broad range of things that they can do and how they digest things. So I'm not going to probably ask you specifics about the parts of their digestive system. I'm not going to do that because it's kind of different depending on each species. But this picture just kind of shows you the basics. So they have a mouth, and then they have a stomach, and then they have intestine, those major parts. So fish do require high quality feed with easily digestible proteins because as you can see from the picture, they have a pretty short digestive system. So it's going to pass through them pretty quickly. So they're not going to have as much time to really digest all of the nutrients. So if you give them really digestible proteins, then you can kind of make sure that they're getting the most out of their feed. So something that's a really big component of their diet is actually fish meal. So that's one thing. You actually have fish that are raised for fish meal or caught for fish meal production, and then that fish meal is actually fed back in fish. The fish are actually very, very efficient, and we've talked about a little bit about feed conversion and gain to feed. So they actually have a gain to feed ratio of really close to 1. So that means that basically, and this would be for a large fish, but for every like pound of feed that you gave that fish, it would convert that to a pound of meat or a pound of gain. So a lot of species are not that efficient. One is like as efficient as you can get almost, like it's very, very efficient. Well, you can get better, but most species are not that good. So that's something cool about fish, that they are very efficient at that. So then you also want to have really good quality feed, because the better feed that you give them, the better nutrient absorption you have. And when you have better nutrient absorption, that means you're going to have less waste, because they're actually using all of those nutrients. And less waste means cleaner water. So if you have pigs on the brain, if you have fish in a tank, then you have less waste. You don't really have to clean that water as often as you would if you're giving them a lesser quality feed. So there's a lot to consider when you're raising it. So fish reproduction, it varies greatly depending on the type and species of fish. So most will lay a large number of eggs, and typically eggs are fertilized internally, and then once they've been fertilized, they're then scattered outside of the body. So many shore and freshwater fish will lay eggs on the bottom among the plants to kind of conceal them from any predators or anything that might eat them. And also, if they're kind of among plants, they may not get scattered by the current as much. Some fish also have live young, so sharks would be an example. They don't lay eggs. They actually have little baby sharks. And this is just a picture that I thought was really, really cool to see the fish eggs kind of up close. I don't know what kind of fish that is. I tried to figure that out, and I couldn't figure it out. But I thought it was a really cool picture. So another really interesting thing about fish is that some fish are hermaphrodites. And so that means that some fish actually have both male and female sex organs and characteristics. That's what that term means. So some fish can actually produce both sperm and eggs. And then this I put in here because I just thought this was really fascinating. You can have with fish what's called sequential hermaphrodites. So that means that they can actually start off as one sex and then switch to the other if the need arises. So if a breeding member of one sex is removed by death or some other situation, the fish can actually change sex to kind of accommodate that balance. So I just thought that was really fascinating. I don't know if anyone else thinks that's cool, but any questions?
Oh, somebody was asking, do clownfish do that specifically? But I think it's multiple species.
It's a lot. It's a lot of different ones. Clownfish might. I'm not really sure, but it's a lot of different species. And then some can actually produce both sperm and eggs at the same time. So it's pretty neat, actually, that fish can do that. I think it's cool.
Of course, I'm mentally going to Jurassic Park and the frogs, but
Yeah.
I'm a child.
Why are frogs always happy?
So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, consumer demand for fish has been increasing, and this is probably due to the health benefits that are associated with consuming fish. So you've probably heard of this at some point if you eat fish or know any people that take like fish oil supplements. Fish are a good source of omega-3 fatty acids, and fish is actually the only food that supplies large amounts of this. So omega-3 fatty acids are really important because they can cut the risk of heart attack and stroke, and they've actually been shown to maybe elevate mood and help prevent certain cancers. So they're really, really important in that way. So you probably have run into some person at some point that takes like fish oil supplements or something like that. I know for some reason professors seem to do that a lot. I don't know why. That's just something I've noticed. So consuming salmon and sardines are good choices because they're low in mercury, which we'll talk about a little bit on the next slide. And then farmed fish is typically better than wild fish. Not always, but as a general rule, it's typically better because it's been raised in a more controlled environment. The genetics have been selected and things like that. And many wild species have high level of PCBs, which we'll also talk about in the next slide. Oh, there it was. Whoever that was. So there are some health risks of consuming fish that you need to be aware of. So mercury, like I mentioned on the previous slide, some fish can be very high in mercury, like the king mackerel, swordfish, shark, and sometimes tuna. And I have that underlined because it's not really all types of tuna. It's just kind of some, which I'll talk about in a second. And mercury can harm the nervous system of a fetus or young child. So it's extremely important that pregnant women, women who are nursing, or women who may become pregnant, and I can't say that without laughing and sounding like one of those drug commercials, should take extra precautions because obviously it could really, really do harm to a fetus or a young kid. So another issue is contaminants such as dioxins and polychlorobiphenols. So that's kind of a mouthful, so just you can call them PCBs. Can be linked to some cancers and reproductive problems. So again, it's really important that if you fall in any of these categories, that you are watching your consumption of fish and seafood, really all seafood. So this is more just for your information. It actually looks a little bit blurry, kind of blown up, but I'm not going to ask you anything from this slide. This is more just for your information if you're curious. If you eat a lot of fish, of the fish that are really high in mercury, moderate, and then low. And so as you see, like some tuna fall in the moderate category. So like your canned tuna, I'm a big tuna fan. Tuna Sensations, I'd like to give them a little shout out. They're delicious. If you have not tried them, get them. But you have some types of tuna that are in the high mercury category. So just for your information, if you eat a lot. So a little bit about infectious disease and food safety. There's a considerable problem with infectious diseases in aquaculture species, which, like John mentioned, they won't necessarily let people in that facility because of biosecurity purposes. So there are relatively few FDA-approved drugs for aquaculture species, and antibiotics are used in aquaculture just to treat disease. So they're not used as growth promoters like they have been in some other species. And then higher levels of organochlorine compounds, including the PCBs and dioxins, in farmed versus wild salmon. So on the slide, a couple slides before this, I said that typically farmed is better, but this is one case where wild salmon actually has a little bit lower levels than the farmed salmon, depending on the farm probably as well. But. So just a little bit about catfish specifically. So U.S. catfish production is mainly located in the South, so Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, and Louisiana. They're typically raised in rectangular pods, considerably larger than a football field, so pretty large pods. And they're intensively raised in raceways with high flow of water. So a catfish female will produce between 3,000 and 50,000 eggs in a single egg mass. So that's pretty incredible. Eggs spawn in spring when water temperatures are above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the embryos will hatch after 4 to 6 days. Hybrid catfish are commercially available in the U.S., and so these hybrid catfish would have claims of higher growth rates, improved feed efficiencies, and greater disease resistance. So that's that word hybrid again that we talked about with the mule, hybrid vigor. They have kind of better qualities than either species that was crossbred. So since that showed up again, probably go ahead and be familiar with the term hybrid or hybrid vigor. So a little bit about food quality, food safety, and disease with catfish. In farm-raised catfish, they may have an earthy or musty kind of off flavor that could be a problem for people that like to eat it. Listeria monocytogenes and other foodborne pathogens have been isolated from channel catfish, so that's also something to be aware of. And infectious diseases are actually responsible for $50 to $70 million in annual losses to catfish producers in the U.S. So it's kind of a pretty big deal. A couple other aquaculture species in the U.S. You have the yellow perch. And the market size for yellow perch is much smaller than other aquaculture finfish species. And then that's just a picture of what that looks like on the right. And then the picture right under that is a picture of a walleye. And there is potential for expansion of aquaculture production. They're supplied for sport fishing as well as for food fish market. So the future of aquaculture will involve the selection and population genetics used to develop aquaculture species with improved growth rate and other performance traits such as disease resistance. And progress is likely with interspecies hybrids. Because with the hybrids, you can create that disease resistance and that better growth rate. And that is all I have on the aquaculture lecture. So again, just a little bit about your test. Again, Tuesday. So it's going to be very similarly formatted to exam 1. I'm going to try to have a little less fill in the blank because I know that not a lot of people were fans of fill in the blank. But similar format, so you'll have some multiple choice, some true false, a few fill in the blank, and maybe some short answer where I kind of ask you to define a term and maybe give an example. So hopefully after exam 1, you're pretty familiar with the test style. So again, make sure that you're going through the notes and make sure that any term that's bolded and underlined that you really understand. Make sure that you understand digestive systems, monogastric, non-ruminants versus ruminants. One question I've already posted in the discussion board for exam 2 review is the components of a rumen stomach. So how many are there? What do they do? What are they called? That's pretty important to know. Maybe know little things like that. Be familiar with the AM/PM rule. I had that in bold on the cattle lecture. Anything that's bolded and underlined, even if it's not a term, definitely be aware of that term or concept. So things like that. Be slightly familiar with the breeds that I went over for the different species. Like I may ask you to pick a species and give me a breed that's used for meat and a breed that's used for something else, if that makes sense.
Can you use
So,
the same thing?
Huh?
Can you use the same thing?
Yeah, I guess so. If it's a dual purpose, you have to specify. So yeah, things like that, just to kind of give you, some things to be thinking about as you study. Obviously, I'm going to go over each lecture in a little bit more detail on Tuesday to really kind of narrow down. And then definitely check out that exam 2 review forum because I will be posting questions and things that I think are important as I go through and make the exam. So if you're on the lookout in that forum, you should see some of the questions that will really help you start studying even before Tuesday. So I will see y'all on Tuesday for the review. So make sure that if you've already looked over stuff, come with questions that I can answer for you if you need anything described better or re-explain. And if that does anybody have any other questions, don't forget the assignment. The livestock production assignment will be due next Wednesday. But probably try to get that done sooner so you have more time to do it. Any questions? All right. Well, then y'all have a good week, even though it's...
You do too.